Time for the demo. The fun part. Okay. All right. Now, during the demo, if you need to take a break, you just get up and do what you need to do. And I am just going to keep on going. This will be watercolor, yes. There, how about that? It's flat on the table, just so you know. And if you prefer watching right next to me, that's fine. You can come up here too. Because sometimes you can learn better by just seeing the application, I find. I have water up here. I've got 3 containers. I'll show you. I'm using Arches 140-pound paper. I have a palette. It's a John Pike palette. I got this in 1992. It's still cruising along nicely with me. And I basically have the cool colors here, blues, reds, yellows, warms over here, and some earth tones here. And a few extras in here. I'm always experimenting with new colors. I have a sponge in there that helps wick some water off my brush as I need. And I've got brushes like that, and it just, I had to get organized to show up tonight. These things are everywhere. I'm glad I was asked. Got organized. And I am going to paint a Boundary Waters scene for you this evening. So it will involve water, landscape, rocks, and I want to try and capture a mood, kind of a moody feel that's also peaceful. So if we can get both of those things going on. And I was just up there 2.5 weeks ago for about a week. And I was up there a month before that as well, so I had a lot of reference photos. I just love it. Love it up there. And I was trying to pick a picture that was a little busier, but it also had some composition to it. So this is at one of the portages we were at. Can you see that? Is that big enough to see? And I thought this one would be interesting because of how busy it initially appears to be. Look at the sky, look at the trees. If you can see the actual photo, you can see all these leaves and branches, and the rocks have all the texture to it, and there's waves. It was a very windy day, and we came down this little channel, and we were portaging to the next lake. And I stepped back and I saw this, and I thought, that even makes its own composition just like that. So I converted the photo to black and white. It's better to paint it black and white if you want to see the values. I like it black and white better. But it really simplifies what you're looking for, what you're going for. It's reversed the way you're seeing it. But then I thought, a challenge as a painter is sometimes you see something outside and you want to stick to exactly what it is. And if you can let go of that idea, you will be miles ahead. Just miles ahead. And simplify. And don't be afraid to change. So I brought some different moods of skies along. I like the softness of that. I'd have to revision that over here if I was to have a reflection there. I like this look too. There's some clouds there, maybe some rain's coming in later during the night. That's kind of nice. You know, you could do something different than that. Here's that little painting I just did during break. Got hidden. There it is. So during the painting, I did a quick little painting to try and capture the feel. Yeah, I mean, this has very minimal detail, but this is a great place to start when you look at shapes. So this is not of that scene, although it's similar. Just trying to show you some simplicity. But if we get this black and white out of here, and we go back to this, we have, what's that, David?
There it is, so it should be what you see is what it is up there now.
Oh yeah, now it's the right way. Thank you. That was throwing me off. I'm like, wow, it's just it. There, now the audience is thrown off. They're used to that. So look at this. Here's one shape. Just follow my pen. The sky is a shape. You ever think of the sky as a shape? You can think of these negative shapes that will make your painting look more interesting when you compose it. You can think of it in reverse. You can think of the positive shape, which is natural to do, like the trees. It is a shape. All of the trees. I'd say go down here, capture all these all the way across. So here's shape 1, here's shape 2. If you squint at it, you may even include the rocks in with the trees. By squinting at it, you can see the values real quick. Just get your eyelashes in front of any scene, even in the room. You can see right away what's light, middle, and dark. And that is a hugely useful tool. You'll get crow's feet by your eyes, but that's totally worth it. Totally worth it. Yeah, and so the water is a shape. So you could have 1, 2, 3, and then you could do the rocks as the 4th. The canoe can be included in there. It's basically looking at values. There's light, middle, medium, dark. Yeah, but you have to change some of these things when you paint. Just because it's dark in the photo does not mean you painted that dark. Or you will just lose your depth of field. It'll just flatten out your painting. So I'll try and work with that too. Okay? So, I am going to sketch this out. You thought I was organized, didn't you? No, it's all good. Here it is. So I've got a kneadable eraser, which is soft. And the reference sketch really puts the distant land right in the middle. Maybe not as interesting as it could be, so I'd suggest either raising it up or lowering it down. So you have asymmetrical placement of things. There's that old rule of thirds. Thirds this way, thirds this way. And where they cross, those are high interest points. But a lot of these rules can be broken, and I encourage you to try to break them and still make your painting interesting. So that distant shore, I'm drawing really light here. This is where you might have to come up and actually see it. So I'm above the halfway point just a bit. And that vanishing point way out here is kind of in the center. I think I'm going to slide that over to the right just a little bit further. And a problem I see that artists will have is they spend too much time drawing before they paint. And that seems kind of counterintuitive, but when you overdraw everything, if you're holding your pencil like this and you're drawing every detail, that it becomes quite painful to paint that. It's just too much. And so if we can just capture the general shape in here, so there's a point of land. Can you see that? Sketch a little bit. See how I do that? And that's going to be a line that I might not hit when I paint. I won't hit it. I'll probably go over it and under it and back and forth. Test. We lost power. Did the battery die? Do we have any more batteries? Looks like the battery died.
I'll get a different one.
All right.
If there is any.
All right. Thanks. Okay, I'll try to talk louder. So then I'm going to bring this other piece of land over here. And I like some of the sky that shows through. You know, that makes it interesting. So there's almost like this one stand of trees here and a second group here. I like that. 1, 2, 3, something like that. Maybe I'll have a lone white pine standing out over here. So I'm going to suggest that, and some of it I'll kind of figure out as I'm painting it, like this. But I don't know if I like the sky going off the corner up here. Could be okay. So I may have some branches extending in and some trees to kind of hold that together. Like so. And bring that shoreline down. And the canoe, this was a 2-person canoe that we had. You kind of got to get the approximate right shape to the canoe, or people who canoe will look at it and say that's not right. You know, there are certain things that need to capture the characteristic shape. Like so. And we had a couple of backpacks in there. So there's some stuff in there, whatever it is. It makes the painting interesting. And these trees up above reflected down until this group of rocks came up here. And I like this curve in the rocks. It almost points back. You know how it's just interesting. The whole scene created its own kind of thing. And so like so. But I'm going to let the rocks go right off over here instead of coming back and disappearing under here. I just think that might hold it together better. I don't know, you could try it different ways. Oh, thank you. Thank you, David. There. Oh, yeah. David Nara is our guy. Thank you. Our tech guy. Really appreciate that. Okay, and then how you do the water really gives a feel to the scene. So there'll be a few rocks here. We can paint those in later. Kind of get the general idea. But that sky, which mood do we want? Or do I not want any of those? I like these cirrus clouds. You know, they're wispy, and there's a haze in the air. And I like the bluish lavender clouds down here. It tells a story of something coming, I think. I like this kind of a broken sun rather than the circle here for this scene is what I'm thinking. So I'm going to try and combine elements of both of these. And I just want to know where I want this broken sun to approximately save some of that light or white paper. So I'm going to just put a little shape around there so I don't cover that over. And I want that to reflect. I'll put a little shape there. All right, so if you're thinking, wow, I can't see anything, now's a good time to come on up and take a look at the sketch because I'm going to start painting. Well, I mean, I could draw darker, but I intentionally draw it like this so I don't put a dent in the paper. Or it kind of ruins stuff. But yeah, I hear what you're saying there. Yeah. Okay, the part you're going to miss out on is seeing how I mix colors as I go here. But, so here's one little thing you can do. I have a hairdryer plugged in way over there. We'll use it on just a couple of occasions. I don't use it very much when I'm painting in the studio because I think it flattens out the look of the painting and it eliminates that granulation, sedimentation that some of these colors like cerulean blue and burnt sienna, they give such a nice sedimentation effect. And then when you lose that, something is really lost. So the paper's still dry. I'm going to just drop some yellow right over that area and around this area where that broken sun is going to show through. And then I'm going to dry it. And then we're good to go. We're just going to paint this like a regular watercolor. So that yellow will still be there and it'll be permanent. So when you paint on dry paper, you're good. When you paint on dry paper, the color is usually permanent. But if you paint on paper that's already wet or soaked, you can lift almost any color off. Oh, there's a timeout right here. So that's a little thing to remember. Because people will tell you, oh, watercolor, you can't change it. That's somewhat true if you're painting on dry paper, but not on wet paper. If you've ever seen Chinky Cheap paint, you'll know how much paint you can lift off, no matter how dark it is, because he paints on very wet paper. Okay. So, just a little yellow there, that's good to go. And I'm going to use a 1 1/2 inch brush to get this going. Alright, so sometimes I tape my paper down like this. I'm doing that tonight just to have more control of it. But sometimes, oftentimes, I don't tape it. I wet the back, and then I start painting the front and start curling, but then it drops back down. And you're always playing with that. It wants to curl one way or the other. But it doesn't, this makes your paper ripple more sometimes when you tape it because you have a dry edge that wants to not expand when the rest of it's expanding. So I'm going to just put clear water on here.
What color yellow did you start with?
Oh, that's a good point. I used some Aurelin, and I think it's lemon yellow. So I'm thinking about the sky as I'm painting this. I mentioned, this is dry, the yellow. I'm gonna go around much of that, but kind of zing across it a little bit. So there's a little bit of moisture on the roughness of this cold pressed paper. And then let this water do its thing and soak in here. And then I'm going to do the same down here. So you got to go fairly fast on this. The canoe, for now I'm going to go around it, but I'm going to paint it and merge it right up to the wet edge once we get going. Usually, yeah.
Your counter is higher than that.
It is, yeah. I've got it higher.
Yeah, even higher if you want.
Yeah. Well, we're just gonna go with this. Yeah, you have to have a few ibuprofen on hand. Back. Okay, and I do have a spray bottle around, so if you see an area getting drier, you can mist it and so forth. It's another little tool. Some people don't like to use them. I say you got to use what works for you and what's going to make your painting work. So I am going to I'm going to go yellow, red, blue in that order, basically. So don't be shy to come on up here if you're thinking, wow, I really want to see, but I'm nervous to come on up. Because this is where the learning can really happen. So these cirrus clouds, and they've got all their different shapes and whatever. This is very light. Very light. This is Aurelin, which is one of your most transparent colors. Whereas lemon yellow is a little bit chalky, but you can mix some of this stuff together. I'm just putting a little bit of that in here. And I want to get the feel that the sky is moving, it's dynamic. And there'll be maybe a little bit of that yellow down here in the water. Let's see. With larger pieces, you have to balance the moisture. So then I'm going to take just a touch of one of the reds. I'll use quinacridone red, but I have opera, I have permanent rose, I have alizarin crimson here. Actually, I'm going to grab some permanent rose. It's cooler. I'm going to try and get a cool feel. It overlaps some of these just a touch. This will dry a lot lighter than it is here, than it appears initially. And, oh man, I need something. I have to grab it real quick. Can you grab that black bag for me, please? Thank you. And in there's a bag of paints. I want to demonstrate that bag right there. And there's a bag inside the bag.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank
here
you.
we are.
Okay, and then please open that. I'm on the gun here for time.
I'll be your Vanna White.
Thank you. I wanted to try to demonstrate how to use some of these opaque or semi-opaque pigments along with your wash, so you can soften the wash in a really helpful way. Okay, so can you open that, please?
Oh, yes,
And then,
of course.
thank you. So I'm just using red and yellow so far. We're going to get some blue here.
Which one would you like?
It's lavender.
Lavender.
It's a Holbein
This one.
color. And here's where I'm going to go to cerulean blue. I like cerulean blue a lot. Thank you. That. Tells. Green there. And here's a color, Holbein lavender. It's very chalky. I'll use it just a bit. But I'm going to start with cerulean blue. And cerulean is semi-opaque. It granulates. And if all of these characteristics of the pigment are intimidating, they're all learned. You can learn all of them. You can read about them, or when you order them, it often tells you there's a symbol next to it, O, S, O, semi-opaque, something. You know. And the skies, it's going to sit back here once the rest of the painting gets underway. So you don't have to overthink the sky. But I want it darker around that bright sun in order to give the illusion of brightness. So you can see I'm overlapping the blue with the red and the yellow, and these rocks down here. I'm gonna try and catch reflection of the colors in the painting on the rocks. And if you mix your yellow, red, and blue, if you get the right ratio, you're gonna have gray. I don't want that, at least not yet.
I don't know why you don't have green.
Well, I didn't stir it on the palette, is why. If I stir it more, it'll turn green. See, it's already turning a little bit green there, and that's okay in here. But so this is first wash, but I want to show you how to get the opaque in there. This is just a lot of area, so I'm going to drag this across there. All right, so some lavender. You can't see what I'm doing. I'll put it in the there. So I've got a bunch of lavender on the cover of the palette. You see, it's you gotta get used to it. It's a different kind of thing. But if you mix that, even on your palette, right in with a semi-opaque, it has kind of a fun effect. And it has to be.
Is opaque.
What's that?
The lavender is opaque.
The lavender is opaque or semi-opaque. The paper has to be pretty wet for it to work nicely, or it just becomes like you're painting gouache or acrylic. So, and then you can take the lavender And so it's not so lavender. Add a touch of red to it, and you can add a touch of yellow, and that will cut it toward the center of the color wheel just a touch. In other words, moving towards gray. So you're always breaking these primary colors if you're trying to paint at least somewhat representational. And if it's too blue, add some red, add some yellow. Try and darken this. I want to keep this wet around it here a bit. I'm starting to lose that around this water area. Gotta go darker here. This is going to be so light. So the reflection and the end of that canoe sticking out, this is going to be a point of interest on the painting. So I want there to be light, it's going to be dark and light, real strong next to each other there. I'm intentionally thinking about that as I paint this. Okay. And these are some soft ripples. We'll get. I left a little white line back there where they'll be. I can work with that later. They'll be where the water meets the distant shore. There'll be a point of land there and there.
Do you usually paint with such a large brush?
Yeah, I do. If possible. It depends on the size of the paper I'm working with. You know, if the paper is smaller, I'll probably shift down to a smaller brush.
You
But
always use a flat?
no, I don't. I have a bunch of rounds too that I use. Like, here's a nice sable. One's fun to use. I use a lot of these silver brushes. So there's a Winona canoe, which is those Kevlar canoes. So while this is dry, but it's wet underneath the canoe, I'm going to extend this out.
Is that gold?
This is quinacridone gold with a touch of raw sienna mixed into it. And I will go over this with one more glaze later on in order to give it a sense of shadow but still have this look of transparency. Now you can tilt the board to let some of this stuff run and bleed as you want. That's all good. And I'm going to bring some of this right down into what will be the reflection, and that will show through later. Like so. We got a nice little run up there, which you can panic, I guess, about it, or you can just be like, well, I guess that's going to just be there. Your brush has to be the right moisture to play around with that. And see there, that's probably not the right moisture, but we can try. So for a demo, let's try, because we learn from things that work and don't work. I'm going to drag that over. I think it's still wet enough to do that. The sky isn't as dark as I'd like it to be yet, and I can still work with that. I'll grab some French ultramarine. And French ultramarine is transparent, but we can mix some of the lavender, the opaque lavender with it. It works. Grab a touch of red, that's permanent rose, touch of that quinacridone gold mix there.
What's the difference between French ultramarine and ultramarine?
The difference between French ultramarine and ultramarine?
Yeah.
Ultramarine was the original, as I've read anyway, and it was so expensive to produce. I think it was only found in France, the materials to produce it or something. No, it wasn't. That's where French comes in. The French created the French ultramarine, which used a less expensive pigment so that artists could still buy it and use it without spending huge amounts of money. That's all I can tell you. I don't really know anything else on that. There. So yeah, it's starting to get brighter with that'll tone down. I'm gonna just add some little bit of reflection here from the land. And so there's our first wash, but you don't have to be done with the wash yet because you have all of these trees over here, and you can just paint them on dry paper, but that's not as effective. So here's a hockey brush, and here's a rake. A couple of options. Show you a couple things you can do with it. And the hockey brush holds so much water. It's spelled H-A-K-E. Looks like hake. But let's get some hue or value that might represent an indication of trees that are further back behind these pines. So it isn't just one flat cardboard cutout of pine trees up here. And see that? See how soft? It's wet yet. If it gets much drier, we're going to have water lines all over the place. So there's one way to do it. You can paint them in, but that's a little more risky than taking this rake brush, which is, it's split. Oh, we lost our power again. So this rake brush is split on the ends. I'll hand this off. And so, can you see that? I'll hold that up. It's frayed. It comes that way, and it allows you to grab some paint and spatter it. And you practice on your palette before you go over here. So I'm going to just spatter a little bit of this up here, because there was an aspen tree or two in there. And if there wasn't, you can always put one in. I mean, you're the artist. That's what I'm trying to encourage you to do here, is not be bound by your reference photo.
Is that sap green?
So this is a little bit of raw sienna, and no, it's not. And French ultramarine. There's a touch of quinacridone. It's all the stuff I'd mixed up on the palette already.
Is that the hockey brush?
This is the rake.
Great.
And so this will give the illusion that there are trees behind the trees we're going to paint in front of these in just a little bit. If you're afraid you're going to splatter everywhere, you can hold a sheet of paper or something over here, or your hand. But it'll help soften that just a touch. There's going to be a branch from a white pine or a spruce coming in right here later on. Okay, so see, I can't even see my sketch anymore, which is fine. But I just have to remember, I wanted one clump of shorter trees and then taller. It's wet like that. You can still just drag some stuff in there. Let it do its thing. Okay. So, see, I'm afraid I'm losing too much of the sky behind there, or if I do much more, I still want that sky to come through. So I'm going to give you a break, and I'm going to go dry this, which at home I'd walk away and leave it sit so it granulates. But due to time, I'll do that. You can get up and take a break, and then I'll be back in about 3 or 4 minutes. Look at the reference photo again, or the black and white. You can see how dark that distant land is. I do not want it that dark, or it will look too close. So I have to artistically change that, or my painting will be less effective. Okay, so I can start with that faraway piece of land, or I can start with one of these peninsulas up here. You can do it either way. I mean, if you're wondering about a method, you can think top to bottom, farthest away to closest. But I'm going to start with a peninsula that's sticking out. And the further away it is, the more blue you generally, at least with this scene, add to your mix. And the closer it gets, the less blue and the more red and yellow. So I'm going to take some cobalt blue touch of Windsor blue, which is also phthalo blue. If Winsor & Newton's not making it, it's called phthalo blue. And then I'm just going to drag a peninsula right in there, just like that. But right away, start giving shape and form to it. And I want to think in terms of one big, powerful shape, not 10 million trees, or it will not be interesting. It's not dark enough. So I'm going to add some French ultramarine blue to it, and just a touch of alizarin crimson. I'm going to darken that point down, just a couple of places. And see, I continue to use the mix that's on the palette because that will keep your painting unified in color. If you suddenly switch to a different color that you haven't used anywhere yet, it will just look like it's out of place. All right. It's going to be a little too dark there. So I'm not done with the opaque lavender yet. You can, so this will dry lighter, just saying that to remind us of that. If you want to have it look like there are rocks on the shoreline, don't go straight down to the shore, just leave a few gaps like that. And then later on, paint a shadow right over it after this is dry. I'll show you that, I'll demonstrate that on this side too. But you can grab some lavender and pull that right through. That kind of is a game changer, the whole thing. But it looks like mist or fog. It might make it too light, we'll see. But it looks good up there, it looks not as good here. That's what distance does, right? Yeah, so I am going to make the tops darker so it looks more like fog down at the bottom. All right. And see how I painted 0 trees. Just a few little tops of trees sticking out. And there, once in a while, is a characteristic shape in northern Minnesota of a white pine tree. You'll see it around here too. But I'm going to take some of that similar color. Let's have one just sticking out here. And they are not symmetrical usually, which makes them so much. You ever seen that?
Yeah.
Isn't that cool? Like that shape, you know, you're like, oh, I know where I am. I'm in Minnesota. You know? And you could have a couple more if you wanted or something, but I wouldn't overdo it. Just want it to stay interesting. So you could add one later if you want. So then we go over to this side. As this is drying, you could merge this together. Well, let me show you that. That is, let's switch to just a little narrow brush, a 3/4 inch flat, and we'll do the distant land here. You remember I said more blue tends to make things look further back, so I'll use some cobalt blue, grab a touch of what I've already been using. And then I like to stop and start brush. You pull your brush, you stop, you start. And then I want it to go down, so it looks like the outlet or the inlet of the lake is perhaps where that lowest point in the horizon line is out there. You can even drag it over and make it touch this so they merge, because you really remember I drew this one shape at the beginning. That's very important. And since this is further away, you don't need trees so tall, just a few little interruptions, because an uninterrupted straight line it's boring. The eye and the brain just lose interest in it. And you want to keep it interesting, and slight variations in your line will do that. So, and that just differentiates between an architectural painting and an artistic painting. That definition right there. So, architectural lines are
correct and maybe perfect, too perfect for an artistic painting. And the lines can become uninteresting. It's not to say architecture is uninteresting, because you see what they do with architecture to keep it interesting. They break things up. They have 2 roof lines, or 3 or 4, and that's why. So, something like that. I overworked that, I'll be honest with you. I should have just dragged right through there. But I wanted to tell you that because you can learn from that. And I am thinking it's a little bit too dark. So I'm going to add some of this opaque, especially as this gets in the distance a little bit more, and drag that right into this. So it lightens it. And just you can.
That's the lavender.
This is lavender, yeah. You can dab some paint off. I mean, there's lots of different ways you can lighten this. I'm just trying to over exaggerate the use of this so you can see that option. Okay. Then we move to this here, and we're going to keep connecting all this together. And so it's pretty late in the evening, so I can think in terms of purples and lavenders instead of greens to some degree. So here I've got purple I've mixed up with alizarin and French ultramarine. Can't stay that color though as we come forward. We'll get some green in here too. So I've got this green that's back here. Oh, if I want to draw this out here, I want to save a couple of trunks of birch or aspen trees. I can just draw them in here, and I would make them different widths. I'll paint around these. Let's see here. Get a little more green look here. There's a tree trunk. And not even following my pencil lines. There's one. This one's too close. We're going to move it over. A little skinnier one there. And I'm going to grab the sable, which comes to a point. A little bit more lavender, or purple, a little cerulean. It's a dance, you go back and forth. You're always trying to, and pretty soon these trees will disappear behind leaves, the trunks will. And we'll just suggest the shape of a pine tree there. Looks quite dark. But we will vary that. I'm going to add cerulean, semi-opaque. Move over here so we get a little different hue, and add a touch of that lavender to it to soften it. And we'll get these trees in distance. They're kind of around the point a little bit. Like so. I had some cerulean and a little bit of the lavender in there, but then I grabbed other colors that are on here to give it a bluish green look. It's a little hard to tell you every color because
He's got quite a mix over there.
yeah, I'm basically using the same mix over and over, but it's just different ratios of each. And again, you're welcome to come up and look. So, and this is a good time where I might take the rake in there again and throw some. It just breaks it up. You're trying to keep the area interesting and not boring. A big flat area is boring too. But if you could shove some paint, like cerulean pushes down, it has teeth in it, so does yellow ochre. It digs through the other paint, grabs onto the paper, and stains it underneath these other colors, and it holds its ground. And it's opening up. I don't know if you can't see that in there very well, but Patty, you can see that here, right? It's that little texture appearance that it does.
I see it if I stand up.
Yeah. Like that.
Oh, yeah.
And you can do it with pure water, just like watching my palette when it's painting. But if you do that, you know, you get this. That's what I'm going for. So this is relatively uninteresting. But you do that, and all of a sudden it's a lot more interesting. And that's what we're doing with these big areas, is we're trying to make them more interesting. And it looks like foliage.
Looks like he's framed and covered.
Looks like what?
I like the color.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, sometimes the palette looks better than the painting. Often. So here's a rock. See that? It's made of shadow. You just have to look at rocks and look at their shapes and shadows, and then eventually you can just kind of create some shapes in there, like that. But my reference has all kinds of weeds and everything up there. I'm changing it to rocks. I will put some weeds out here. Make it more northwoodsy and rugged. What's the temperature? Yeah. We could have a discussion on that around this painting. Okay. Not very interesting. So that line is relatively straight line here. So I'm looking at my reference, trying to get ideas. I'm kind of going to bring this out. I'll have a rock or two out here. We can work with that later. But this would be the edge of the rocks or foliage. We could suggest there's some foliage in there, like these gold in there. Maybe a little bit of, there's rose or dogwood is up in the boundary waters. Get some of that alizarin crimson, which is perfect complementary color to the red and the green. Show those in there a little bit. But then we come to the water. Now we basically have the trees done. We can work with that more. And we'll work with the rocks after we get the water. I like to see what the water does, and then I can see how little I can do with the rocks at the end. If I do the rocks first, I might be like, oh man. Sometimes, anyway. So I'm going to use a lot of the same colors. They're already mixed up here on the palette. And the darkness, and let's see if the black and white and the color. See how dark the water is over the top of the canoe? It defines the edge of the canoe. This is what really sets it off. And in front of it, it defines the bottom edge of the canoe. So this is really important. And it'll define the edge of the shoreline. It's going to disappear behind the canoe. It's not, that turned out black. I didn't want black. So I'm going to change that to a deep green, red, blue. And the bags and everything in the canoe, the backpacks are shapes that are important to go around. There, like that. See the reflection starting to emerge. And then on this side of the canoe, we'll come right up here. Like so, and we have to keep that moving. Some fresh ultramarine. But the canoe is reflecting its warmer hue in there, so add some raw sienna, yellow ochre, raw sienna, queen gold looking at, and try not to overwork it. So this is one shape. This whole reflection is one shape with a few little ripples off the edge. That's how you want to paint it. There could be a couple that are individual like this. But for the most part, it's one shape. And this is going to define the top edge of the foreground rock. Sure. So this reflection is somewhat mirroring that tree up there. It's a little bit outside of it, but that's generally the move we're going for there. Okay, and then to try to get the canoe to sit in the water more, I'm going to take a flat brush and glaze over the canoe with a transparent color, raw sienna, with another transparent cobalt blue, which if you stir them too much, it'll be green. But this is a wet edge down here. And if I can get this, if I get the timing right, it will. Yeah. This edge softens and they pull into each other. And I like that. I want this darker out here. Edge, and we'll bring this back. That. Oops. Too dark. So, temptations to overwork it, just kind of have to put it on there. For these canoes, if you're a canoeer, you know that's not how the one looks. The front edge looks like that. So we've got that sitting there. So I've heard it said that a landscape without the sign of humans or a bird or whatever in there, a beaver, is poetry. And then with something in there, it's a story. It's just something to think about anyway. I don't know how true that is, but I think it is true when I think about it. Okay? So I'd say we're about 7/8 done with painting. It doesn't look like it, does it? But 3/4 anyway. It's coming along. I think another 15 minutes or so it should be about done. So, I'm going to spill some paint there. That's okay. So it looks like snow almost over here yet. No, I don't want that. So, how much of the water now do I do before I do this? It was those reflections. I want to see how dark this is. That helps for me for it to read so I can start working with the rest of the water. And that's just what I'm going to do. So I'll take a flat brush. You could take a round point. Looking at my reference here. You see this? See this shape right there of that? It's sky blue here. But I have to decide what color do I want to pick up here, put down here. Well, if I want this really bright, my rocks are curving over here. I want to pick up some of this darker color. That's just my thinking anyway. So let's get some of the lavender. Whatever we use up here, a little French ultramarine, a touch of alizarin crimson, and there's a little white lighter edge right up against the rocks, but so I'll save that. So I'm looking at values, not the actual color on my reference photo now, which is very fun. It's kind of freeing, kind of terrifying sometimes. You feel like you're going without a map. But, oh, there that died again. Oh, test, are we on? Oh yeah, we are. There it's back. Okay. And so it's not such an immediate escape from the dark to light. There's a little bit of a reflection on this side. And you notice the waves coming into this little harbor, this cove, they change directions. And it's very important to notice that if you want this to look more realistic. So just try and imitate that angular change. And if you study waves, the closer to the foreground you get, the more angular they are. The further out, the more level they are. It's just perspective. It's the way that works. And I could diagram that out for you, but not at this moment. So that's a little bit too dark now, so I think. So I want it to have kind of a soft feel. There we go. The wind was kind of ripping in here, but we sort of got out of the wind a little bit. It was so windy, we got stranded behind an island for 2 hours. We had to wait for the wind to go down. That was the next day. But it's the first time I've had that. First time I've had that happen up there. Yep, I think we are out of commission. No, we're not. The secret, David, is I have to turn it off and back on, and then it comes back. I think seems to be what's happening. So. Yeah. So I got it on the outside, so I don't know. Okay. All these references. This is a little imaginative here in this now. So I'll bring a few of these ripples up to the edge of here. The rocks will be there. And the ripples change direction when we go around the corner here. So if you track my time, where are we at?
I have 8:35.
Oh, okay. No problem. Use something like this. In fact, I can just sort of make this up. I can kind of make this up here. I don't have to mirror everything in the sketch. I just need a few of those waves to read right, so they do what they're supposed to. We will grab some of that color from the landscape up above and drop that. That's usually more of a smooth water look, but I just want some of that color in there. I'm trying to make this more peaceful than that windy day. I just want a few ripples coming in. Like that. And if you really want to make it look smooth and peaceful, you allow the distant land to reflect also. At least a little bit, like that. Lift some of that off of there. Like so. Okay.
Can I see the?
Sure. Probably I'll take this off too.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Okay, and then since there's a tall tree right here, maybe there's a couple of reflections on the waves there. Something like that. Okay. We've got to do something with the rocks in the foreground, so I'm going to go back to my 1.5 inch brush. There it is. Rinse that out. And I really want them to reflect, so they look like they're at a low angle. They'll reflect the light of the sky off the rocks. And that light is already on here. But if you squint at this, that's a lot darker than that.
And I would assume, and I just, from looking at lots of sunsets, this rock will look quite dark compared to the water at that low angle. So I can still go with this value pattern here and be pretty safe. So, I don't know, I'll take some raw sienna. I'm trying to warm it up a bit, but I still want it to be fairly cool because it's evening. I don't want it to look like all of a sudden got really warm up close. And then, find some scratch paper. Yeah, I'll test this out. Back of that. I want to see if it skips the paper like I want it to. Not quite. So I'm going to switch to a round brush. Use the side of it and see if I can get that to work better. Basically using the same colors I've been using, palette, and just varying ratios. See if I can capture some of the texture and the value. This one rock comes across like that. There. So this is called counter change right here, where it's going to be light rock against the dark background. Now the rock's going to turn dark against the light background. And it's really important to notice that when you're looking at your references, or because it makes it so much more interesting. So this is called counter change. The rock edge will be dark against light, and then it's going to go light against dark right here, just like that. Let's see here. Going too slow, I don't like that. So, a couple of big cracks in the rock. There's one here, one there. A few ridges over here. That. Okay, blue, yellow, red, gray. That. I'm going to use a spray bottle to soften this. It's just a touch. That. And then this has its own value right down in there. Comes up to the end of the canoe. So I'm going to put a warm glaze over that shore and I'll let it dry. The same with some of these rocks. Just to set them back, because that's not the focal area over there. Yeah. I'm going to have that stick out more so it's more interesting there.
And we'll put a rock out here. Bring some of that lavender in. Okay. Well, that's drying. I feel like I didn't do that fast enough to give it that fresh watercolor look. But I'm trying to go back and try to fix it. It's tough. We'll get the canoe so it looks like we can see down into it. Like this. And maybe there's, for the sake of complementary colors, I'll get a reddish purple bag in there since we have quite a bit of green. And maybe another one of the packs is blue. Let's do that. Like so. So, then those trees. So here's some lavender again. You could use cobalt blue, alizarin crimson, but let's give the trees a shadowed side that's still the illusion of white. Some of this lavender. You know, you can paint a few extras in there if you want, but too many doesn't always work either. Let that dry. We'll put a couple of the characteristic dark marks on there, and then.
We have 15 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, we'll be fine. Almost done. Doing a couple of these ripples right up to the edge. Then there's something about pulling it together at the end that is important. So if you want it to look a little bit foggy, hazy, this can be done. You can do it with opaque, you can lift paint off. I'll show you a couple of each. We gotta fix those rocks over there too. So you can spray a little bit over there. Put just a little bit of moisture over here. Gotta be real careful about that. Extend it across the point. Take a dry paper towel, and you can lift a little bit of that paint off, so you don't have to go out and buy the opaque. And it will give a little bit of an illusion of fog. And sometimes stirring that opaque in, whether it's this or Chinese white, you can play with gouache. It's more intense than Chinese white, for instance. But let's see if we can get this to separate this point, put more distance between it than these trees. That's really what I'm trying to do when I add fog, is to create more atmospheric depth. And maybe there's some fog in here, yeah.
It looks like you got a little cabin there in front of those businesses.
Yeah, we think a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You got a little
Like
cabin.
a tent.
This little guy?
And then where's it all go?
Well, that's kind of fun. Should probably leave that then. There's the tent. We're wondering where we were going to camp. Yeah. Just like that. I'm going to throw a little bit of this in here too so you can just see how that functions over there. Looks really calm when you come straight down like that. I'm going to soften that just a touch, like so. And then you can play with, and this is risky too, but that sun area to make it look brighter. This needs some clean water, which I do have.
There's also the time.
That's the time that we quit. This can be the time that you really destroy the painting. It really can be. But so if you take just clean water and a brush, a flat or a round, and in a couple places you scrub the hard edge, and you soften it, and you take a dry paper towel and drag across there. You see how softening it just creates an illusion of light that's emanating out. And so it's really creating what's a lost edge. You know? Makes it look like it's glowing, perhaps. That's really the goal. I mean, you could go in there with paint, try and add to it, but that's where, if you like your painting really well, you might not want to try that at the end. But I don't know. There's always something to be learned. So like that. And then you can do the same on the water in just a few areas. So it looks like it's really sparkling. Something like that. So it's hard to lift the yellow because you remember why? Yeah, we painted it on dry paper, so it's very permanent, quite permanent. But you can lift around it. And then now, if there's anything to be done at this point, it's just fine tuning a couple things like adding additional rocks or darkening a rock like this. So it makes the light stronger. Maybe the very edge of the shore is wet because the waves have been pushing up on it. So, and that creates a darker look. You do that, and you'll have to just step back and see, does it work or not? Guys, always stepping back. And then sometimes you might get a area like this done and say, wow, that looks terrible, and what do I do? But it's just like when you create a shadow on a painting, and the way to lay that shadow down and to almost make it invisible, or at least transparent, I should say, is to put a line through it or a track in the road or whatever. That's the same with these cracks in the rocks. So I suggested them a couple earlier, but if you add some that are darker, it turns this into a shadow. Doesn't take much. Just a couple of them here and there, and there's a couple of them going off the edge here. Alright, and for the sake of just some pure fun, let's add, it's kind of a cool night, and the mist is rising in the woods. Get some of that in here, and we'll break some of these lines. Like that. That was some lavender and gray and everything else that was mixed here. And then a few of those characteristic marks on the birch trees or aspens. There's both up there. You could have a few branches, but that's too much detail. It can really draw away. Even those marks are plenty dark. Like that. We could have some weeds sticking out there, but I think for the sake of time, we put a lid on it and call it good. So the canoe itself has these aluminum, here's my bag of paints, there it is. There's aluminum edges on the top, the gunnels, and you can grab like a gouache or a Chinese white. If you've lost those edges, and with a brush that comes to a point, you can add just a few of those sparkles back on there. And sometimes that really revives an image like this, but it wouldn't take much here, just hardly needed. That goes against everything a transparent watercolorist would do. You'd be cringing at me, but right. So, I mean, you could add an eagle in the sky or a beaver lodge or loons or anything in here, but basically that is it, and you sign your name on there, and it's done. Thank you.